Alright, this is Dr. Boff. Welcome back to some Kerbal Space Program. Alright, so today I'm working on that Duna return mission. And the way I'm going to do that is rather than build the whole mission out at once, try it, and then find out 2 hours in that it doesn't work properly at some late stage, I'm going to work backwards mostly. So I'm going to start by building the Duna escape stage. So that's what I've got going on over here. This is the gnome, because it's got a big pointy hat. And this is going to do nothing but get our Kerbals off of the surface of Duna and up into a stable orbit around Duna. So it's got a Poodle engine on the bottom. It's got one of the lighter, more fragile lander-style Kerbal containers, pods, whatever you call them. And it's got a big hat full of fuel. So that's kind of intentional. So you notice not all the fuel is below the pod. Some of it is in that big pointy hat above. The idea for that is I kind of wanted to keep the center of mass relatively high, or at least not directly above the engine. So if you have the center of mass down here, then your craft can be really unstable because the gimbaling from the rocket is providing not quite enough torque to keep your rocket pointed the way you wanted. So you kind of want the center of mass to be a little bit far away from the rocket when you're under power, so I can have this tank nice and full when I'm taking off. And when I'm landing originally, when this thing gets dropped onto Duna, then I'd probably like this big pointy tank to be empty, so the center of mass would be lower, and then it would be more stable on the ground. But we'll deal with that when we come to it. I've also got these pods, these fuel pods on the outside. I'm hoping not to need those. I've got them here now in case I need extra fuel to do the Duna escape, but I'm going to try launching without them first and see if I can get away without them, because I'd like to have those spots reserved for some extra hardware that I'm going to bring down to Duna and then jettison before the escape. So I'm going to use the console to spawn this onto the surface of Duna, and we can test to see how well it works. Alright, so I've spawned this escape vehicle on Duna. That's a little bit of a lie. So the console, it turns out, doesn't let you spawn on the surface of planets. It lets you spawn in stable orbits. So I spawned this thing into the lowest orbit around Duna that I could, and then I just infinite fuel cheated my way into a landing. So we can basically start this from down here and see how well it works as a Duna escape vehicle. So I've turned all the cheats off, and I probably should actually double check that I've actually turned all the cheats off, so let me check that. Yep, so I've got all the cheats off, so that's good. So we can test to see how well this is going to work. So like I said, I'm going to try first time around to do this without those extra little fuel pods. So let's get rid of those. Yeah, go that way. No, don't fall onto me. Damn it. Good enough. Okay, so let's try that. So we have to launch. We have to kind of launch east, which means figuring out which way east is. So let's see. The game is telling me, based on the compass, that north is slightly to the left. So we need to I think based on the compass we need to steer kind of down and to the right. Yeah, whatever, let's try that. I've dropped a save here, so if I get the launch wrong we can always just try it again. This engine may be more powerful than I need. That was a really rapid takeoff. I probably don't need anything quite that fast. Alright, let's just take a quick look and see how we're doing. Okay, we need an apoapse of 50k to get out of the atmosphere. So, not quite there yet. Let's power back up. Yeah, so they may have underestimated how weak the gravity is here, and may have overdone things a little bit. So I may be able to squeeze some more efficiency out of this thing. Which, by extension, may mean that this whole mission is much easier than I thought it was. Let's see. Is that enough? Almost. Okay, that should be all that I need up there. So, I even think I did that the right way. Yeah. Alright, so let's burn there, stabilize our orbit. Oh, wow. I need so much less delta V than I thought for this. This is working out really well. That's okay. Yeah, I'll get everything above 70. While that's happening, I think I'm gonna transfer some fuel. Oh, that's actually working the way I thought. So it's pulling out of that tank first, and it's not pulling out of the nose cone tank. That's actually what I want to happen. Yes, that's great news, because that keeps my center of mass high. Kerbal might do that automatically, actually, because it wants you, in general, the game wants you to succeed, so it doesn't pull too much mass out of your top, thus making you bottom heavy, and then somewhat counterintuitively really unstable under power. Alright, let's fast forward a little bit. I shouldn't need very long for this burn, because this engine is kind of oversized. And in fact, I might, after we finish this trial, I might size the engine down a little bit to be more efficient. So I might do some retries to see how little thrust I can get away with, and then resize the engine down. Also, I missed my node because I was talking. But, like I said, I can just blast this out, so it's totally fine. Yeah, it's like a 15-second burn. Super easy. Incidentally, if you're ever burning too late, when you're trying to reach a stable orbit, you can correct by just aiming yourself a little bit up the horizon. There we go. That's pretty good. Wow. Okay, so I vastly overestimated how much fuel I need. So strictly speaking, the mission that I had planned for this vehicle is now done. The vehicle is in a stable orbit around Duna. Let's just check. Yeah, wow. Okay, so that's really easy, actually. Way easier than I expected in terms of delta V. So let's see how far we can go, I guess. Maybe if this same vehicle as built can get us further, it may as well then. So let's see if we can put it in a stable orbit around Earth. It doesn't have the equipment it needs to land on Earth, but if it can get in a stable orbit around Earth, then the pick up the astronauts phase of this mission is going to be much easier. So I need to burn on the side closest to the sun. Let's do that. Actually, this transfer should be relatively easy too. Yeah, compared to doing this on Eve, this is easier than I thought. So I may, after finishing the Duna return mission, we may go to Eve, because that's a lot harder than this. I know I would need a lot more delta V to get off of Eve. Must be some combination of the planet is so small, the atmosphere doesn't exist, things like that make this a little bit easier. Okay, that is 700 meters per second delta V. I might not have that, actually. But we'll find out, I guess. Now let me forward to that node. Alright, that should be close enough. Let's give it a burn. Let's see how much fuel we've got left. So I've really stripped a lot of the weight off of this thing. So it doesn't have any parachutes, doesn't have any heat shields. It's got some solar panels and some basic communications stuff. It does have docking things, so it's got a docking port in the middle. If I separate out, there's a little docking port in there and some RCS engines for docking. So this is built to be docked for rescuing the astronauts. On the way back, I never meant this vehicle to actually get all the way back to Kerbal. Just kind of spend the rest of its life out in space. But if we can do a rendezvous around Kerbal to bring the astronauts home using this relatively simple vehicle, that reduces the complexity of other stages of the mission by quite a lot. So let's go for that. Okay, I'm just gonna burn slightly anti-normal to get my ascending node down. It's already pretty small. One of the things that makes this transfer super easy is that the orbital planes of Earth and Duna are pretty similar. There we go. That's already... yeah. That did not require much. Okay. So now we go around again until we can get another encounter. Alright, so I've got my encounter, and I'm going to do the trick I did with the satellite last week, which is I'm going to put in a little bit of a maneuver at 90 degrees in my orbit before my encounter. Let's see. Usually I'm able to use that to tweak my encounter to be exactly what I want with minimal effort. So if I'm going to do a nice rendezvous, then I need this to be something roughly like equatorial. So let's tweak that. And yeah, if I do this in interplanetary space, that's super easy. Oh wow, so I can just fly straight at the center of the planet. That's probably great news. Maybe let's not do that. That's not really helping. The other thing I want to be going around the right orientation. So I want to be heading around kind of the way you would normally take off so that it's easier to meet up with the craft. I want to make the rendezvous as easy as possible. So, let's see. We need to tweak it. So that's the opposite of what I want. Oh, come on, maneuver node, you're not making this easy for me. Now I'm hitting the moon. That's not bad. Let me do that. So I know this note says the maneuver node's in 4 days, but Remember, in interplanetary space, the exact timing of the burn isn't important, it's the exact delta V that really matters. So let's just point in the right direction and watch as we move our encounter to be how we want it to be. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And that's within the moon's orbit too. So we could do this, if we do this return, put ourselves in a stable orbit around Kerbin inside the moon, then we can just, you know, leave them up there for a few days while we build a recovery vehicle and figure all that out later. So let's just make sure we have enough Delta V left in the tank to get caught here. So let's warp to there. Let me make sure I'm approaching the right way. Also, yeah. Right, there's a ton of Delta V between going around the planet west to east and east to west, right? You want to get that right, even though it's not always going to be obvious what you're doing. Alright, let's see what we got left in the tank. Alright, that's pretty excellent. I do technically have a little bit more, but I don't see a way to do this mission wherein this craft also lands on Kerbin itself. Because doing that means all of a sudden I need to carry a lot of extra weight. So I need to pack a beefy heat shield and parachutes and things like that. Given how close I cut that fuel usage, I don't think that's going to work. I do want to have like a little bit of spare fuel because, right, there's no reason to assume that the actual launch during the mission will go quite as perfectly as this practice run has. Yeah, if just the plane is a little bit off or I make some small mistakes in the original takeoff on Duna, I want to make sure I still have enough fuel to make this mission go. So, I think amending the plan, this return vehicle is going to get astronauts off of Duna and into a stable orbit around Kerbin, where they can get picked up and carried home from there. So the way this would actually work is I've got the gnome hat will separate from the rest of it, then I've got this big old docking port in there, and the Kerbals can get picked up via some sort of other craft with a matching docking port that I could throw together and send up and use to pick them up. So that'll kind of be a less dramatic addendum to the Duna return mission. Alright, so there's one more thing I actually want to try today. I'm going to go back and I'm going to load the save where I had this thing spawned on the surface, and I'm going to try to take off with ever-decreasing throttle. Because if I can scale down the engine a bit, use a smaller engine to do the same mission, then I could squeeze a little bit more fuel out of it, and any weight savings in the later stages of the mission really pile on to the earlier stages, because then that's less stuff I have to lift off of Kerbin, and as a result, it increases the chance I can do the whole launch and transfer thing in a single launch, and get the astronauts back to this point in only one launch, and just have a second launch to come up and pick them up out of this orbit. So that would be awesome, because that would be a lot less effort and finagling. So let's go back to that save and see what I can do. Also, it should be noted I didn't need those 2 extra fuel tanks. Yeah, did just fine without those, which is great news because that opens up some spots for me to carry other mission critical things over there, and it's going to make building the thing quite a bit easier. So let's try. Let's see if I can get away with launching at, say, 30% throttle. Oh, just barely. Ooh. Okay. That I've way oversized this engine. 30% throttle. Wow. Okay, so I can, whatever the thrust is on this guy, I can drop that to just below half. I probably want a little bit more thrust than I've got going right now. Although if I replace the engine with a lighter one, then that takeoff would be more convincing. So let's go back to Space Center. Yeah, leave anyway. Let's go back to the Space Center and take a look at engines for a minute. All right, so let's make some engineering decisions. We know that we don't need these tanks, so we can get rid of those. That's pretty cool. So right now, yeah, we're using the Poodle. So let's see, that's got a thrust of 64 kilonewtons in the atmosphere, 250 in vacuum. Wow, so that's actually a pretty weak engine in the atmosphere. It does so much better in a vacuum. And if I look over at the specific impulse, so it's got a specific impulse of 90 at sea level and 350 in the vacuum. So, okay, I can go down to an atmospheric thrust of something like 32 and a vacuum thrust of something like, well, the vacuum thrust may be 100 at minimum. So if I go over to the, let's see, well, all right, so I've got the nuclear engine, super efficient, 800 specific impulse in the vacuum, ridiculously good, but the thrust is not going to do it. I've got the narrower engines, which are actually nearly as powerful as the Poodle, so plenty of thrust, but the specific impulse is not as good. 310 in the vacuum, and similar for the swivel. So that is not going to do it because that's not efficient enough. And I barely had enough fuel to do that mission as I did it. So we're keeping the Poodle. It's too much thrust. It's a little too heavy, but we're just going to make do with it. And we're going to try to make up for the weight by using it as our transfer engine. So we should be able to do the transfer from Earth orbit to Duna, since we were able to do it back the other way with that engine. And we'll just need to bolt on some landing stuff. All right, so next week we'll be building our landing stage and figuring out how we're going to attach everything we need to harvest fuel and land safely on Duna in such a way that we can then jettison it, so only the stuff here has to make the return trip from Duna. We'll probably use this engine for transferring there. Since we can burn off this fuel, we'll be refueling on Duna. And then the only other thing we need to do is staple all of this to the top of a big rocket to launch it off of Kerbal, so that we can use this Poodle engine to make the transfer over to Duna. So only 2 things left we need to build. 3 things if you count the extra launch vehicle that's going to go pick up our astronauts from Earth orbit. So we will keep working on this next week, and I will see you then.